In 1978, at the very peak of her dazzling career, one of the most beloved actresses of her time suddenly and inexplicably vanished, leaving behind only a trail of rumors and speculation. The public at the time actively discussed theories of a major scandal, a tragic overdose, or a secret escape from the world of fame. 22 years passed before a powerful storm triggered a massive landslide on one of the hills, unearthing something completely unexpected from beneath the earth: her rusty, once bright red Ferrari, deeply buried beneath the slope. This shocking discovery instantly revived a long-forgotten investigation, finally aiming to shed light on the true events that occurred almost 2 decades prior. The landslide occurred in the early hours after dawn, as nature was just awakening. Weeks of incessant winter rains had relentlessly saturated the loose, yielding soil located above the famous Mulholland Drive until it finally lost its ability to hold its ground. When its southern edge suddenly collapsed, it dragged a significant section of the roadbed with it, about 50 feet, as well as massive electrical poles and the last trees desperately clinging to the steep slope. Streams of mud and debris surged downward, completely covering the winding road below with a thick layer of wet, constantly moving clay. By mid-morning, road traffic in that section was completely blocked, traffic flows were promptly rerouted, and a specialized repair crew immediately began work to stabilize the damaged foundation. It was the heavy excavator operator, Ethan Williams, who first noticed an unusual glint of metal hidden beneath the earth. At first, he carefully snagged the find with his bucket, believing it was just another drainage pipe, part of the underground utilities. However, as the powerful bucket continued its work, gradually revealing the curved, mangled surface of red, heavily dented steel, and then a distinct fragment of a side mirror, Ethan instantly realized he was looking at something else. He immediately stopped the machinery and reported his astonishing discovery. No one present could have even remotely expected to find a car here, much less in such an incredible position. It was nose down, deeply embedded in the hillside, as if it had been dropped from a great height, straight from the sky. Within hours of the unusual discovery, Los Angeles Police Department officers quickly cordoned off the entire area, establishing a strict perimeter. The discovered vehicle was a vintage mid-70s model, distinguished by its characteristic low profile and graceful, elegant lines, which were visible even through thick layers of ingrained rust and caked-on mud. The car's hood was deeply dented inward, deformed under the pressure of decades of shifting soil, and the windshield was completely opaque, covered in a thick layer of dirt. In the morning sun, the slope around the car was slightly steaming, creating a light mist, as workers carefully cleared the earth using hand tools. It was at this moment that a horrific find presented itself: a human hand. It was not attached to the car itself, but was merely a pale bone, wrapped in faded red satin, ominously protruding from the earth just a few feet below the front bumper. Excavation work was instantly halted, and someone immediately contacted the coroner's office. Shortly after 10 a.m., Detective Olivia Bennett arrived at the scene in her unmarked Crown Victoria. Her police uniform still showed signs of morning rumpling, and her coffee cup in the holder remained untouched, indicating her haste. 30-year-old Olivia possessed a perceptive, sharp gaze and had recently received a promotion, moving to the prestigious Major Crimes Division of the Los Angeles Police Department. However, judging by the skeptical glances from senior officers as she stepped onto the muddy shoulder, this promotion did not yet seem to have earned her full recognition in their eyes. The field supervisor, standing nearby, called out her surname, Bennett. He then added, addressing her, "They said they're sending someone from downtown." "You got her," Olivia replied succinctly, absently adjusting her jacket collar. The supervisor gestured towards the collapsed slope, continuing his report. "One body found, unidentified so far. The car itself is too damaged to run its numbers quickly. Coroner's en route." Olivia squinted, carefully surveying the entire scene. The damaged Ferrari, despite its deplorable condition, seemed almost picturesque. It was tilted, half buried, its once scarlet surface now covered in intricate streaks of oxidation and caked on mud. Downslope, among the debris, satin fabric ominously clung to what little remained of a human ribcage. The detective opened her notebook, preparing to document details. "How long has this been open?" she asked the supervisor. "A couple of hours, no more." The road collapsed at 6 a.m. sharp. The crew found the car around 8 a.m., her interlocutor clarified. "Are there any signs of foul play?" "No brake marks or a trail leading to this spot," the detective continued to inquire. It looks like the car was intentionally buried here. It could have been here for decades, came the reply. Olivia turned towards the coroner's van, which was pulling up behind them at that moment. Let's identify the deceased, she stated resolutely. By noon, the remains were carefully extracted. What was found was incomplete. Most of the upper torso, both arms, and jaw fragments. The red satin fabric, once a high-quality robe, was now heavily worn and discolored by time. A broken necklace clasp still clung to a discolored vertebra. The rest of the body had apparently been destroyed by the effects of time, water, or wildlife. No purse, no identification, no wallet, just bones, fabric, and a hillside that had held this grim secret for over 2 decades. A field technician carefully collected a strand of tangled dark hair from the inner fold of the robe. Doesn't match the skull. Could be someone else's, he commented. The medical examiner nodded, thoughtfully saying, could be the killer's. Olivia remained silent, carefully observing the scene. Something about all of this didn't seem random. The position of the body, the robe, the car itself, it all resembled a carefully planned burial more than a typical accident. The Ferrari was an old, European model with a characteristic silhouette that, even in its ruined state, still whispered of its former luxury. Dino 246 GTS, one of the forensic photographers said, crouching beside her. You don't see many of those, especially in that color. Olivia raised an eyebrow, asking for clarification. Is it identifiable? He nodded. That Rosso Chiaro red. It was a signature color back then. Limited production. And custom seat trim too. Olivia wrote this information in her notebook. The faded dealership sticker on the inside of the door frame had disintegrated with time, but they managed to extract a partial VIN, engraved under the dashboard. Cross-referencing this information would take days. There were no license plates left on the car. Nevertheless, something about the car itself stirred Olivia's memory, evoking vague associations. Late that evening, a call came from the coroner's office. The dental records were in. We have a match, the message stated. Olivia froze, bracing herself for the inevitable. It's her, Scarlett Monroe. Olivia slowly closed the folder lying before her. She stood, took a deep breath, and reached for a new notebook. So, it's not a cold case anymore, she said, addressing an invisible interlocutor. It's a murder. By the time Olivia arrived at the precinct the next morning, the case had already become public knowledge. The front-page image in the Los Angeles Herald was truly striking. A grainy photograph of Scarlett Monroe, leaning against a red convertible, her lips parted in laughter, eyes gazing somewhere beyond the frame. The headline read, Scarlett found. Mulholland mystery rekindles decades-old legend. It didn't take long. Someone, perhaps a forensic intern or a member of the cleaning crew, had leaked the information to the press. Now, every news agency in Los Angeles rushed to resurrect a story that had never truly died, only lain dormant. By noon, camera crews circled the Landslide site like vultures. Radio stations played old audio clips of Scarlett's films, and talk shows wildly speculated about murder, suicide, and conspiracy, fanning the flames of sensation. Captain Brower stood motionless in the hallway outside Olivia's office, holding a printed memo. We're putting a lid on this, he said dryly, his voice devoid of emotion. Immediately. This is now a closed murder investigation. Olivia nodded, confirming. Understood. Deep down, she welcomed this decision. If Scarlett's death was staged, she didn't want the culprit to be warned about the investigation's progress. That same day, Olivia headed to the basement archives of the Los Angeles Times. She had called ahead and arranged to meet Arthur Sterling, a retired entertainment columnist who had covered Scarlett's life throughout the 70s. Arthur was now pale and thin, his face deeply lined, and his eyes dulled by time. But when Olivia mentioned Scarlett's name, something flickered behind his glasses, like a spark of old memory. She was lightning in a bottle, he said, his voice momentarily regaining its former strength. Not just beautiful, but smart. She knew how to play the game until the rules turned against her, he mused. Then Arthur poured them both a cup of instant coffee, which immediately filled the air with a light aroma, and unfolded a thick manila folder crammed with documents. I covered her for 4 years, her roles, all sorts of rumors, and that very year she literally vanished from the face of the earth. Then she reappeared for her last interview, and poof, as if she dissolved into thin air. Olivia began to flip through the yellowed newspaper clippings, premiere photos, scandalous headlines, grainy paparazzi shots, and gossip columns dedicated to her on-again, off-again romance with a famous director. One name repeated itself again and again, like a persistent refrain: Brandon Hayes. She vanished in July 1978, Olivia clarified. Was there anything unusual in her behavior or events in the months leading up to it? Arthur handed her an old VHS tape in a plastic case. You need to see this. The interview had been recorded in May 1978, just 2 months before Scarlett's mysterious disappearance. Olivia watched it that evening alone, sitting on the floor of her apartment next to a borrowed TV equipped with a VCR. Scarlett looked perfectly poised, composed, and radiant in the soft studio light. Her voice was velvety smooth, like silk. She joked easily with the host, casually recounted childhood stories, and hinted at a swift return to the Broadway stage. Nothing in her tone or demeanor indicated instability or fear. There was no mention of stress, no strange or alarming behavioral patterns. Scarlett gave the impression of a woman with clear plans for the future, expecting them to come to fruition. Olivia watched the interview twice, pausing every few minutes to carefully study Scarlett's expressions. There was something measured, perhaps even wary, but by no means broken, in her eyes. She wasn't falling apart, Olivia said aloud to herself. She was preparing for something. Back at the precinct, the coroner's lab sent Olivia a quiet but significant update. The hair sample collected from the robe near the remains was confirmed. It did not belong to Scarlett. It likely belonged to a man. The hair was medium length, dark, and unprocessed. However, DNA analysis yielded no matches in any national database. There were no criminal profiles, military, or medical records. Olivia stared at the report, deep in thought. If it wasn't Scarlett's hair and it wasn't catalogued, it could belong to the person responsible for her death, or someone who tried to help her. In any case, the time frame was narrowing. Scarlett had been intentionally buried. Whoever was with her at the end took the time to wrap her in a robe, place her under the slope, and meticulously cover their tracks. Olivia sent the sample for re-examination, hoping a match might be found later. For the next few days, she delved deeper into the case, reading interview transcripts, watching archival talk shows, and reviewing old press kits. In 1976, Scarlett abruptly broke her contract with a major studio, which came as a surprise to many. She took a year-long hiatus, moved to Palm Springs, and largely stayed out of the public eye. Tabloids at the time actively speculated she had a nervous breakdown. Several rumors whispered of a possible pregnancy. One even hinted at a secret stay in a rehabilitation center. But when she reappeared in 1978, she looked strong, clear-eyed, and ready for anything. It was this version of Scarlett that haunted Olivia, a woman who had something to say, but perhaps never got the chance. Late that evening, Olivia sat on her living room floor, watching Scarlett's 1974 drama, The Clay Rose. It wasn't the type of film she usually enjoyed, a historical romance, heavy, at times drawn-out monologues, but Scarlett commanded the screen, captivating the viewer. Every expression on her face carried deep meaning. Every silence seemed deliberate and significant. Olivia found herself leaning forward as Scarlett delivered the film's final line, which sounded like a prophecy. The truth doesn't disappear just because you close your eyes. She didn't know why, but the phrase resonated deeply with her, leaving an indelible mark. By the end of the week, a partial tip came in from an anonymous caller. In the late 1970s, a man was often seen near Mulholland Drive, lingering at exits and observing the road with binoculars. He drove an old truck and wore the same brown jacket every day. Olivia parked across the street from a low-slung duplex in Woodland Hills. The lawn in front of the house was completely unkempt, and a white tarp billowed over part of the roof like a sail. Olivia exited her Crown Vic, double-checked the address, and walked purposefully to the door. Walter Jenkins, now 68, looked gaunt, with jaundiced skin and a noticeable limp acquired after a car accident in 1991. In 1979, he served time for orchestrating car thefts near Laurel Canyon, a chop shop operation that briefly made headlines. Olivia leaned against the railing as he rasped on a cigarette, exhaling plumes of smoke. He didn't deny his criminal past. A Ferrari, a Dino, she asked, hinting at a possible connection. Nah, he said, shrugging. Those were too hot. You drive one of those around here, people notice right away. I like things you could quietly dismantle. Chevys, Datsuns. Olivia showed him a 1978 photo of Scarlett. He squinted, examining the picture carefully. That actress, right? No, I never met her. Not personally. He agreed to give a new statement. Back at the lab, Olivia insisted on a forensic check of his former workshop's records and compared latent fingerprints found in the Ferrari's interior with his archived prints. Nothing matched. Later that week, a faded invoice surfaced, showing Walter was incarcerated from April to August 1978. Scarlett disappeared in July. The lead went nowhere. 2 weeks passed. No new leads emerged. At Monday morning's briefing, Captain Brower addressed those present with practiced indifference, as if reciting a memorized phrase. The autopsy showed no signs of blunt force trauma, no precise time of death. It could have been an accident, a crash. Maybe she drove off the road and couldn't get out, he droned. The case remains open, but we're scaling back resources. Bennett, you'll track any late leads. Several heads nodded, relieved to essentially close the case, even if formally it remained open. Olivia didn't reply. She returned to her desk and stared at the image still on her screen, the red dino, nose first into the earth, as if swallowed whole. She knew better. The burial was deliberate. Someone wanted her gone, and they had almost succeeded. They were ready to call it a tragic accident. But Olivia wasn't. The gates of Belmont Studios slowly opened, just enough to allow Olivia's patrol car to enter the premises. Although the studio had changed hands 3 times since 1978, its reputation hung in the air like smog, enveloping everything. In the 70s, Belmont Studios was home to mid-budget thrillers, romantic films, and projects for young, rising stars. Scarlett had filmed 3 of her movies there. Olivia compiled a short list of surviving employees who might shed light on the events of those years. Most of them were now in their 70s or 80s. Some responded with polite evasions, trying to avoid conversation. Some hung up before she could introduce herself. In a dusty corner office, now serving as a prop storage, she found Beatrice Howard, who had worked as a hairdresser during the last 2 years of Scarlett's contract. Beatrice greeted her with cautious warmth, brushing imaginary lint from her sleeves as if preparing for an important conversation. She was sweet, but different towards the end, Beatrice said, stirring powdered creamer into her tea. Sometimes paranoid, always checking her purse, not leaving things in her dressing room. Olivia leaned in, asking for clarification. Did she ever say why? She was afraid of someone, I think. But in this town, that's like saying it's sunny, Beatrice replied, hinting at the pervasiveness of fear in Hollywood. The conversation stalled. Most former employees Olivia contacted gave her similar variations of the same refrain. I don't remember. She didn't tell me anything. Scarlett kept to herself. I didn't know her well. But Olivia knew when people lied, and many of them weren't just forgetting. They were clearly afraid. Something about Scarlett's name still carried weight, causing apprehension. Or perhaps it was the name of whoever was with her last. Back in her apartment, Olivia rewatched the May 1978 interview. This time, she wasn't watching the broadcast version, but the outtakes, the raw footage. And this time, she noticed something minor but significant, a barely perceptible pause in Scarlett's answer when asked about her relationship with her last director. Scarlett's smile faltered for just a second, betraying hidden tension. Then she said, "We had creative differences." Olivia paused the recording. It wasn't a phrase Scarlett would use in jest. It sounded too formal and detached. It was late evening when Olivia tracked down Shirley Davis, a former production assistant on Moon River, Scarlett's last film before her extended career break. They met in the quiet food court of an empty Glendale mall. Shirley, around 55, was plainly dressed, her sunglasses still tucked into her collar, even indoors, as if she had just come from outside. I thought she just ran away, Shirley said, her voice tired. Everyone thought so. But you had doubts, Olivia pressed, trying to get to the truth. Shirley hesitated, lowering her voice to a whisper. I think she was planning something. Not a disappearance, but something bigger. What do you mean? Olivia asked, sensing she was getting close to something important. She was asking about lawyers, about where to go to. Well, drop something on someone. Said she was tired of being used, tired of being watched. Did she say who? Olivia clarified. No, Shirley replied, shaking her head. Olivia quickly jotted down notes. Do you remember anything else? The detective continued to ask. She said if anything happened to her, the people at the top would bury it, and they'd bury her too. The phrase stayed with Olivia long after she left, deeply embedding itself in her mind. That evening, back at her desk, Olivia sorted through her notes, photos, and printouts. The evidence board looked like a half-assembled puzzle, Scarlett at the center, surrounded by disparate rumors and conflicting stories that just didn't fit together. Then her desk phone rang. The voice on the other end was raspy, male, and quiet, almost a whisper. "I hear you're investigating Scarlett's case," he said. "I was on the crew back then. A studio tech. I know some things." Olivia straightened, her attention instantly sharpened. "Who is this?" The man ignored the question as if it hadn't been asked. "Doesn't matter," he cut in. "What do you know?" Olivia pressed. "I'll meet you somewhere public, off the record." "I'm not stupid." Olivia quickly wrote. "Where?" "Vista Theater parking garage roof. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. Don't bring anyone." The line went dead. Olivia leaned back. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't move, processing the information. For the first time in days, the case felt like it was breaking open, as if a key had been found. Someone out there still remembered, and they were finally ready to talk. The meeting at the Vista Theater parking garage never happened. Olivia arrived 5 minutes early, waited 20, but no one showed. It wasn't until the next morning that she received another call. This time, the voice on the other end was raspy, breathless, as if the person had been running. "Too many eyes last night," he said. "Meet me at the Sunland Diner. Northwest corner booth. 10 a.m. Don't be late." By 9:45, Olivia was already sitting in the empty booth, sipping bitter coffee, waiting. She recognized the man as soon as he walked in. A grizzled beard, weathered hands, a faded work jacket with a long peeled patch that once likely indicated his affiliation. He sat down without a greeting, just a single nod, as if they were continuing an old, interrupted conversation. "I was a Dolly Grip," he said. "Belmont Studios. I did 2 films with Scarlett. The last one's when things went bad." Olivia waited, not interrupting. "There was a shoot," he continued, his voice dropping. "Not for a movie. Something unofficial. They called it a costume test, but it wasn't for wardrobe. It was for leverage." "Leverage?" Olivia asked, her eyebrows furrowing. He met her gaze, his eyes full of bitterness. "Blackmail. The actresses didn't know they were being photographed that way. Scarlett found out. Somehow, she got her hands on contact sheets, photos from several sessions, girls who were promised lead roles, fame, their own trailers, and in return, he let the phrase hang in the diner's grease-laden air, unfinished. She told me she was going to expose it. She even joked, said, "Let's see if they put this in Variety." Olivia's pen hovered over her notepad, ready to record every word. And then, for days later, she disappeared. He scribbled something on a napkin, an address in Burbank. A storage room beneath Soundstage B. He said it used to be a print archive. Negatives, raw outtakes, all the junk the executives didn't want to throw away. "Scarlett told me that's where the most important stuff was kept." Olivia thanked him, realizing she had received a valuable lead. Before she could ask any more questions, he suddenly stood up and left, his coffee untouched, as if he had never been there. That same day, Olivia drove to the address, an old, warehouse-style studio building with boarded-up windows and a chain-link fence that creaked in the wind, creating an eerie melody. According to the signs, the site was being redeveloped into a sound design center, but there were no signs of activity. No security, no personnel. She slipped through a side entrance and descended into the basement via a rusty staircase that groaned ominously under her weight. The room downstairs had clearly been hastily cleared. Dusty outlines were visible everywhere where cabinets once stood. Fragments of paper lay on the floor, scraps of folder labels, brittle 35mm film. A still-fresh cigarette, but in the corner indicated a recent presence. Someone had been there very recently. Olivia walked around the room, feeling the emptiness thicken around her, pressing on her mind. Back at the precinct, she requested a check of city records, building maintenance logs, lease transfers, and police patrol routes in the area. No recent records, no authorized access. Either someone had erased the records, or someone with access had tipped off the location, signaling a cleanup. Olivia returned home after 9 p.m. The house was dark, unusually quiet, which immediately raised an alarm. She instinctively flicked the light switch. Nothing. "Grandma," she called, but only silence answered. She cautiously walked down the hallway. Her grandmother's bedroom door was ajar, the frame splintered near the lock, as if someone had tried to force it open. Then she saw an overturned lamp, shards of glass scattered across the carpet, and pale hands protruding from behind a dresser. "Grandma!" Olivia rushed forward. Her grandmother lay on the floor, one leg twisted beneath her, blood congealed at her temple. Her chest barely rose. She was still alive. Olivia grabbed her phone, dialed 911, then pressed a kitchen towel to the wound, whispering, Stay with me. Please stay with me, over and over, like an incantation. Paramedics arrived within minutes, their sirens piercing the night's silence. They loaded her grandmother onto a stretcher. Olivia rode with them, clutching her hand the entire way, but the old woman never opened her eyes. At St. Margaret's Hospital emergency room, staff wheeled her into the trauma bay. A nurse pulled Olivia aside, her voice grave. She's in critical condition. We'll do everything we can. Olivia didn't reply. Her hands were still stained with her grandmother's blood, a stark reminder of what had happened. 2 hours later, Olivia was allowed to sit by her grandmother's bedside. Machines beeped steadily, marking the rhythm of life, but her pulse was weak, her breathing shallow. A thin trickle of blood had dried on her temple. Olivia reached out and gently touched it. The hand twitched faintly in response, as if trying to cling to life. Her eyes fluttered open. Olivia, her voice was papery, a barely audible whisper. I'm here, the detective replied, leaning closer. Her fingers squeezed slightly, pulling Olivia's hand. The box in the floor. Olivia leaned in closer. What box? In the closet, under the tree. Find it. Olivia's throat tightened with a rising lump. Grandma, just rest. We'll talk soon. But her grandmother's gaze had already dimmed, as if the light was fading. Her chest rose once more, then stopped. Olivia sat there in silence, the beeping of the machines turning into a continuous tone that filled the room like a descending curtain, marking the end. Olivia returned home sometime after 2 a.m. The house still smelled of blood and broken things, the air heavy. A draft seeped through a cracked window in the hallway, adding to the chill. She entered her grandmother's bedroom, kneeling by the closet. She pushed aside shoes and storage boxes, her fingers gliding over the floorboards until one gave way with a soft creak. She pried it open. Inside lay a worn shoebox, sealed with yellowed tape. On the lid, in neat, slanted handwriting, was written, "For her, when she's ready." Olivia sat on the floor, feeling the tension build. For a long time, she just stared at the words, trying to make sense of them. She removed the tape, her heart now pounding, her hands trembling not from fear, but from something deeper. Anticipation mixed with dread swept over her. Inside the box, beneath a letter and a necklace, lay a small photograph. Its corners were curled, the colors faded like a memory suppressed for too long. Olivia slowly picked it up. It was a candid indoor shot. A young woman sat on a couch in a modest room, sunlight catching the tips of her auburn hair. Her expression was weary but unmistakably proud, radiating an inner strength. In her arms, carefully wrapped in a pink blanket, lay a newborn baby. The woman's face was familiar. So familiar that Olivia's chest tightened with sudden realization. Scarlett Monroe. The resemblance was too strong to ignore. Olivia had always noticed something unusual in her own eyes when she looked in the mirror. A deep-set melancholy, a shadow of something unattainable. Now she saw those same eyes looking back at her from a grainy, 30-year-old photograph. The baby, she realized, was her. With trembling hands, Olivia unfolded the letter. It was written on aged, cream-colored paper, the handwriting neat but a little hurried, as if someone had written it in a moment stolen from danger. The ink had faded but was still legible. To my little girl, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't tell you myself. I want you to know first and foremost that you were never a mistake. You are the only thing I ever did that made me feel clean, real. I kept you safe by letting you go. I had to. The man I once trusted, the one who said he made me. He started tracking my every move. I wasn't the first girl he tried to own, and I won't be the last. I had proof, photos, names, enough to bring down men who thought they'd never answer to anyone. I thought I could expose them, disappear, and raise you in peace. But I was wrong. And I think they're coming for me now. If this is all you get from me, know this. I wanted you. I loved you. You are not their shame. You are mine. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me. Your necklace was the first thing I bought when I knew you were coming. Mine is its twin. If they're together again, it means the truth found you. Don't let them bury me forever. Scarlett. Olivia finished reading, her head bowed. Her fingers gripped the edges of the paper, crinkling it where her hold tightened, betraying her inner turmoil. All those years she was teased in school. The sideways glances, the cruel jokes. The orphan girl. No one wanted her. None of it mattered now. She felt the sting of tears behind her eyes, a lump of emotion rising in her throat, but she didn't cry. She sat motionless, hollowed out by the revelation, unable to reconcile the quiet, ordinary life she had lived with the truth she now held in her hands. Her grandmother must have known all this time and protected this secret with every fiber of her being, safeguarding her. The necklace she found in the box was delicate gold with a small five-pointed star. Olivia unclasped it from its cloth wrapping and held it against the photograph of the necklace she had retrieved from the scene with Scarlett's remains. They were identical. It was real. All of it. When the bitterness subsided enough for her to breathe again, something else filled the space. Fire. Olivia stood, her legs stiff, her jaw clenched. She carefully placed the letter, photo, and necklace back into the box and put it in her bag. She no longer needed to ask who the person who made her was. She already knew. Brandon Hayes. She had read the early gossip columns, the hints of a semi-denied romance between a young Scarlett Monroe and a rising director. No one called it what it really was. Not then. Coercion, manipulation. That wasn't the language the public knew how to use. Not in 1978. By morning, she had filed a sworn affidavit and an official warrant request. The office building was located on a side street near Laurel Canyon, sandwiched between an art gallery and a yoga studio. From the outside, it looked innocuous enough. Frosted glass windows, a sleek black awning, a brushed aluminum sign reading Hayes Pictures in minimalist font. Inside, it smelled of dust and air freshener, giving it a sense of abandonment. Several old movie posters hung on the walls, showcasing Hayes' hits from gritty 80s film noirs to stylized early 90s courtroom dramas. His career had been long and successful. The forensic team was already at work inside, gloved, methodical, and thorough. Olivia watched them meticulously search the rooms, missing no detail. She spoke quietly, directing them to a back hallway. "There's a chance this space has been altered," she said. "Check for structural inconsistencies, false panels, hollow partitions." One of the technicians tapped a section of the back wall in the editing room. The sound was different, duller than expected. He turned to Olivia, his eyes lighting up. "Found something?" It took 15 minutes to carefully open the wall without damaging evidence. Behind it, a narrow crawl space was revealed, dark and musty with mold, the air heavy. Inside were two plastic containers, the kind used for film reels. Each was sealed, marked only with Roman numerals, indicating their importance. The investigators slowly lifted the lids. Inside were dozens of undeveloped negatives, sealed in archival envelopes. Some were labeled with actresses' names, others with dates. None were authorized, confirming their illicit origin. Beneath the negatives lay ledgers, hardbound notebooks with lists of names, monetary amounts, and check numbers. Some were scribbled with initials, others with job titles. Olivia flipped through one page, her gaze catching a specific entry. $15,000. Wardrobe $2,500. Makeup $30,000. Grip, silence, Scarlett, FX. Her hands froze, realization washing over her. This was the paper trail. Everything Scarlett had tried to gather. Records of silence bought with checks and promises, confirming the scale of the conspiracy. The darkroom hummed with a low noise and red light. It was located in the basement of the Los Angeles Police Department's Forensic Media Division, a place that seemed decades behind the rest of the department, but suddenly became the most important room in the building, the center of the investigation. Olivia stood behind the glass, arms crossed, watching as a technician carefully laid out negatives on a light table. One by one, images of women came into focus. Some were grainy, others disturbingly clear, as if capturing a moment of truth. The camera angle was low, surreptitious, indicating secret filming. Faces weren't always shown, but when they were, the expressions made Olivia's stomach clench with disgust. Fear, embarrassment, discomfort, masked by forced smiles, spoke volumes. "This one," the technician said, pointing to a specific image. Olivia leaned in. That was Scarlett. She was sitting in a velvet chair, draped in a silk robe, slipped off one shoulder. A man's hand was visible at the edge of the frame, adjusting the light or pretending to. Scarlett wasn't smiling. Her lips were slightly parted, as if in mid-protest, her eyes heavy with worry. In another photo, she stood before a painted backdrop, her arms tightly crossed over her chest, as if in defense. The robe was now open, loosely tied at her waist. Her eyes were fixed on someone off camera, narrowed, expressing suspicion. "Wardrobe test," the log read. But there was no mention of a wardrobe department, or a camera assistant, or a lighting crew, only a date. April 3rd, 1978, a month before her disappearance. Other negatives followed. Other actresses Olivia didn't immediately recognize. Different eras, different names. All were cataloged, packaged, and entered into evidence, becoming part of the case. A separate envelope labeled 1978 promo outtakes was found among the negatives, its contents recorded on partially damaged 16mm film. In the media room, Olivia sat in the dark with two forensic examiners as the film ran through the projector. Static danced across the screen before settling on a shaky shot of Scarlett, sitting in the velvet chair, her hair pinned up, her gaze sharp and piercing. Scarlett paused, looked at someone off camera, as if addressing an invisible interlocutor. Then her voice dropped, becoming more serious. They think they own us, you see. I was 19 when this started. These men, they've been pimping out girls like me since I was 19. She laughed bitterly, her laughter sounding like a sob. And now I have proof. The recording cut to static, the screen filled with noise. Silence remained in the room as the film ran off the reel, ending the viewing. Olivia slowly exhaled, realizing the magnitude of what had happened. She was going to name names. Looks like someone made sure she didn't, one of the technicians muttered, his voice filled with indignation. Olivia didn't reply. Her thoughts were already racing ahead, planning her next steps. With irrefutable evidence now in hand, photographs, ledgers, checks, and a partial recording, Olivia prepared her case report. Her presentation to the district attorney's office was met first with shock, then grim agreement. What they had was enough for charges of conspiracy, illegal surveillance, coercion, and potentially murder. Olivia stood before a whiteboard, mapping out the timeline from Scarlett's last interview to her tragic disappearance. Everywhere, the name Hayes sat like a rotten thread, tying events together, revealing the true picture. It's time, she said resolutely. Let's bring him in. The tactical team moved out just before dawn, while the city still slept. Hayes' estate was located in the Hollywood Hills behind wrought iron gates and tall hedges, concealing it from prying eyes. It was quiet. Too quiet, which raised suspicions. Olivia approached the door, clutching her badge tightly, ready for action. They used a key found during the office search to enter. Inside, the house was sterile, lifeless, as if it had been abandoned in haste. Drawers in the study were open, their contents emptied. Closet shelves were bare. A safe was left ajar, but was empty. In the kitchen, a burner phone lay on the counter, its back cover ripped off. Olivia picked it up with a gloved hand and handed it to a technician. Check for recent calls or messages. Already wiped. The officer replied, confirming their fears. One of the team members returned from upstairs, his voice filled with disappointment. Bed stripped. Luggage is gone. Passport drawers are empty. Olivia turned to the senior officer. Issue an alert. By nightfall, a national arrest warrant had been issued for Brandon Hayes. Olivia stood before a bank of monitors in the precinct's command center, watching as alerts for regional departments lit up on digital maps, spreading the word about the manhunt. The FBI had been brought into the investigation. Airports, train stations, and border crossings were notified to cut off all possible escape routes. She didn't speak for several minutes, lost in thought. She thought of Scarlett, sitting in that chair, whispering the beginning of a confession into a camera she likely didn't know would be buried for decades. She thought of the women in the photographs. How many of them never spoke? How many tried and were silenced? And she thought of her mother. Not the socialite, not the sex symbol, but the young mother in the faded photograph, holding her infant with tired but fierce eyes, full of determination. We'll find him, Olivia said quietly, her voice filled with certainty. One of the agents beside her nodded. He can't run forever. Olivia's gaze remained fixed on the screen, her resolve unwavering. He can't. It was late April when the call came. Olivia had just stepped outside for a break. The city breeze was thick with exhaust fumes and something that smelled like spring, bringing new hope. Her cell phone rang with an unfamiliar number from Northern California. Detective Bennett? A voice asked. Yes, she replied. This is Sheriff Dustin Cole from Monterey County. You're going to want to hear this. The drive up the coast was quiet, peaceful. A quiet Olivia welcomed, giving her time to collect her thoughts. The sun hung low over the cliffs as she and two U.S. Marshals drove past winding pines and tight turns, following the sheriff. Sheriff Cole drew out the details as long as he could before revealing them. The rental house was a short-term beach property, cash only, no ID required, which immediately raised suspicions. The property manager had noticed someone strange, an older man, traveling alone. The man kept the blinds drawn all day and only went into town after dark. He had requested heavy drapes, which was unusual. Cole said he had introduced himself as a writer. As they approached the rental house, the sky was darkening, presaging night. The driveway was empty, but a light flickered behind drawn blinds, betraying a presence. The marshals moved silently to both entrances, and Olivia followed, ready for action. Inside, they heard the sound of drawers opening, a suitcase zipping, as if someone was packing in a hurry. The door gave way with 2 kicks, opening the way. Los Angeles police. Hands where we can see them. Brandon Hayes stood in the middle of the living room, his shirt half unbuttoned, a suitcase beside him, ready to leave. His face was hollow, paler than Olivia remembered from old photographs, but his eyes were sharp, full of hidden knowledge. Hands on your head, Olivia said decisively. He quietly complied. No resistance, no denial, just resignation. As the handcuffs clicked shut, Hayes looked up at Olivia and gave her a long, measured gaze, full of hidden meaning. Hayes was booked into a secured facility in Monterey, then transported under heavy escort to Los Angeles. During processing, a DNA sample was taken. A cheek swab signed and logged. All procedures followed. Olivia didn't speak to him. Not yet. She needed the evidence to speak first, to present the full picture. 2 days later, the results came in. The lab technician handed her the folder without ceremony, but his face said enough, conveying the seriousness of the situation. The hair from Scarlett's body, Olivia said, anticipating the answer. Matched, he confirmed. Brandon Hayes, he was there. Olivia nodded once, taking in the information. She turned the page to the DNA analysis summary. The evidence didn't just place Hayes at the scene of Scarlett's final moments. It irrevocably linked him to the crime, leaving no doubt. There was no plausible denial, no second suspect, no studio cover-up to hide behind. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of the moment. Olivia sat in the passenger seat of a forensic van parked behind the Los Angeles Police Department headquarters. An envelope lay on her lap, light, almost absurdly light, as if it contained nothing important. Inside were the materials for a second DNA test. This one had been ordered quietly, without any record in the department's official case log, to avoid publicity. Only she and one trusted lab technician knew. The test was personal, deeply personal. She had sealed her own swab along with Hayes's. The form had a fake name and a case number that corresponded to a closed case from 2 years ago. Just a placeholder, nothing more, to obscure the true purpose. The technician was to compare the samples and relay the results directly to her. It was late evening when the call came. She answered before the second ring, unwilling to wait. A match, the technician simply said, his voice devoid of emotion. Paternal, 99.9%. Olivia didn't utter a word, didn't even breathe, as if holding her breath. I can print it out if no, she said, cutting him off. Destroy the samples. Thank you. She ended the call, stared at the horizon, and let the truth settle like sediment in water, gradually clarifying. Brandon Hayes was not just the man who orchestrated Scarlett Monroe's death. He was her father. The cold concrete walls of room 3B never changed, no matter who sat on the other side of the glass. Today, the chair was occupied by a man who once wielded power like oxygen, needed by all, accountable to none. Now he looked small in it, as if deflated. The shackles on his wrists didn't clink. They simply held him still, depriving him of movement. Olivia entered with a folder tucked under her arm. She didn't bother with a preamble, getting straight to the point. She sat down, opened the folder, and began laying things on the table one by one, as if dealing cards. First, a page from a ledger. Check numbers, dates, names of payees, scrawled in long-dead handwriting, testifying to old machinations. Then the photographs. Scarlett's eyes stood out among the rest, clear, weary, unmistakably present, as if she were looking directly at them. Next came a still from the recovered recording. Scarlett's lips parted as she began to speak words that never made it to air, remaining a secret. Olivia placed the final sheet on the table, a printout from the lab, confirming the DNA match between Hayes and the hair found on Scarlett's skeletal remains. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, awaiting a reaction. We have a lot to discuss, she said, her voice calm but firm. Hayes gave a faint smirk, but his eyes flickered, betraying nervousness. So this is how it ends, he asked, his voice hoarse with age and defiance. Olivia didn't reply. She waited. I've seen the reports. Your team thinks it has a story, but you don't understand what those years were like. Everyone knew what they were signing up for. It was part of the game. No, Olivia said evenly, refuting his words. It was a crime. He shrugged, trying to maintain indifference. Scarlett, she knew how to play it better than anyone. Olivia pushed the still closer to them, pointing at the image. You were in a relationship with her. Hayes tensed, his face changing. You groomed her. You filmed her. You controlled her. And when she told you she was pregnant, you turned your back on her. It wasn't like that, he tried to argue. Olivia let the silence stretch, allowing him to realize the futility of denial. He slowly crumbled, losing his composure, but she felt it, sensing his inner tension. He continued, the smirk gone from his face. Yes, we were together, secretly. It wasn't supposed to last. She became too obsessive, started questioning everything, and then one day she shows up with that photo. A baby. Said it was mine. Was it? Olivia asked, her voice even. His eyes twitched, betraying nervousness. She said it didn't matter. She just wanted out. She wanted to end everything, but she wasn't going to go quietly. Not without trying to drag me down with her. She said she had proof, letters, photos. I told her we could talk privately. Mulholland. Hayes's mouth was dry now. He swallowed. He nodded once, confirming his words. She came to the house. She had a box of things she wanted to show me. Said if anything happened to her, someone else would know where to look. She wanted me to confess, to give her an out. Olivia watched him carefully, but her voice was even, devoid of emotion. And she came to the house. She wanted to meet face to face. I thought I could make her listen, but she didn't come to negotiate. She came to threaten to destroy everything I had built. Olivia didn't speak, allowing him to continue. I snapped, he finally said, his voice filled with despair. She wouldn't stop. She said she was going public the next day. I told her to sit down, calm down, but she kept screaming. So you silenced her, Olivia stated. I didn't mean to, he quickly said, trying to justify himself. I grabbed her. She hit her head. It wasn't supposed to go that far. But you buried her anyway. Olivia continued, not letting him off the hook. He turned away, unable to meet her gaze. You made sure the car disappeared. You used connections to clear the storage. You paid off staff. And you kept the photos, like trophies. His voice dropped to a whisper, almost inaudible. I didn't think they'd ever find her. Olivia slowly pushed her chair back and stood. Her hands trembled, but she held them at her sides, striving to remain calm. She turned towards the door, then paused to give him one last look. I hope you rot for what you did, Dad. The word landed like a slap, sharp and painful. Hayes's face crumpled for a moment, just a flicker, before he turned away, unwilling to show his emotions. It began quietly, just a column on page 2 of the Los Angeles Times, a photo of a rusty Ferrari in the Mulholland mud. By the time Brandon Hayes was led into court in shackles, Scarlett Monroe's name was everywhere. In news feeds, talk shows, and articles headlined "The Star Who Didn't Get Justice Until Now." This time, the headlines weren't sensational, they were serious and accusatory. This time, she wasn't a fading starlet with secrets. She was a victim. Olivia watched it all silently, avoiding the spotlight, focusing on the core of the case. She focused on the facts, the negatives, the ledger, the last letter, the confession. But public attention changed everything. New calls started coming into the Los Angeles Police Department hotline. Anonymous letters. Women, some of whom had long buried what happened, began to come forward, finding courage. Some were named in names Olivia recognized from old movie credits. Others were interns, makeup artists, bit-part actresses. Not all of them wanted to be public, but they wanted Hayes held accountable, for justice to be served. It was the biggest case in the Los Angeles Supreme Court that year. The prosecution's witness list stretched for 10 pages, testifying to the scale of the crimes. The courtroom was tightly controlled but packed, people eager to see the resolution. Hayes's legal team, expensive and experienced, tried to steer the narrative back to the old story. Scarlett's alleged instability, her disappearance, her uncorroborated claims. But the evidence spoke louder, drowning out their attempts. Olivia testified at the end of the second week of the trial. Her badge was polished, her voice calm and steady. When asked to recount to the court the discovery, the landslide, the body, the identification, the chain of evidence, she did so professionally, without undue emotion. Then came the question from the defense, designed to undermine her credibility. Detective Bennett, isn't it true that recent DNA testing confirms the defendant is your biological father? A hush fell over the courtroom, as if everyone held their breath. Olivia's jaw tightened for only a moment, betraying her inner tension. Then she met the lawyer's gaze, her eyes full of resolve. Yes. Unfortunately. Several jurors shifted, surprised by the answer. And how does that impact your objectivity in this case? The lawyer asked, trying to undermine her authority. Olivia didn't flinch, her voice firm. It doesn't. I wasn't raised by him. I didn't know who he was until this investigation began. But let me be clear. I am disgusted to share blood with him. He is a monster, a coward, and he killed my mother. There was a full 5-second silence before the prosecutor stood and said, "No further questions," ending the cross-examination. A total of 5 women testified. Each told her story, but the pattern was the same: promises, career prospects, then coercion, silence, shame. The defense tried to attack their credibility, tried to hint at money, media attention, false memories. But it didn't work. There were too many of them. Their stories echoed through the decades, and Olivia was their anchor, their voice. The jury returned in less than 7 hours. 12 faces, expressionless, their countenances unreadable. The jury foreman stood and read the verdict. Guilty on all counts. She looked at Hayes. He didn't react, just sat, head tilted slightly, as if waiting for someone to say, "Cut." But this wasn't a scene. This was real. The judge's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Brandon Allen Hayes, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck, confirming the sentence. Justice had been served. The cemetery was located on a quiet hill in Westwood, beneath a line of eucalyptus trees swaying faintly in the spring breeze. The city hummed beyond the gates, but here it was quiet, an atmosphere of peace. Scarlett had finally come home. Olivia stood beside the modest headstone, dressed not in uniform but in a simple navy blouse and charcoal skirt, emphasizing the solemnity of the moment. She hadn't invited cameras or dignitaries. Only a small group of those who mattered. 2 of the women who testified, the studio mechanic who risked everything, and the forensic scientist who spent long nights verifying bone structure and dental records. No press, no spectacle, just the truth. The headstone was simple. Scarlett Monroe, 1946 to 1978. Beloved mother. Olivia approached last. She held something in her hand, a small gold star on a delicate chain. She had worn it for weeks, rolling it in her palm like a worry stone, a symbol of her connection. Now, kneeling, she carefully placed it at the base of the headstone. There was so much she wanted to say, but the words came slowly, with difficulty. "I used to think I was abandoned," she murmured, her voice trembling. "That you didn't want me, that you left." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't turn away, looking at the headstone. "But you didn't leave. You fought." A week later, she stood outside the Los Angeles County Clerk's office. The form was already filled out, signed, notarized, all formalities observed. She waited quietly for her number to be called. In a small cubicle, she handed her documents to the clerk. "Name change?" the woman asked, glancing at the form. Olivia nodded. The clerk gave a faint smile, then typed, "Detective Olivia Monroe." "Sounds good." Olivia didn't smile back, but her eyes softened, expressing deep satisfaction. "It's my mother's name." One evening, as dusk approached, Olivia returned to Mulholland. The hillside had been reinforced, the red tape long gone, the slope overgrown with hydroseed and erosion control netting, concealing the traces of the past. Drivers passed by, unaware of what lay hidden beneath the earth, what tragedy had unfolded there. She parked and got out, walking towards the spot. The air smelled of damp earth and eucalyptus, creating an atmosphere of tranquility. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote barked once, breaking the silence. She stood for a long time, arms crossed, lost in thought. Then she whispered aloud, "I hope you didn't hurt. I hope you knew you weren't alone. I love you, Mom. Rest in peace."